Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Brian. Today we're going to be doing a Patreon picks, which is where one of my Patreons tells me what I should listen to and to do it. No questions asked, no theme requirements or anything like that. I've done, we did an almost 40-minute song last week, so far there's no restrictions on time either. This one comes at us from Hunter Coffin de Kiefer. I really hope I pronounced that one right. Um, It says that we should check out The Aftermath in Jat Krula by Shadow of Intent. Um, yeah. It says mostly an instrumental song, some vocals near the end, about a precursor civilization responsible for all life in the galaxy that reappears after millennia to find themselves disappointed with what life has become and endeavor to destroy and recreate it. If that's not a heavy theme, I mean, yeah. Let's get to this. I am very excited about this. I was impressed with Shadow of Intent last time we checked him out. I think I was. Anyways, the name sounds familiar, and I'm pretty sure I was excited about that. Anyways, though, let's get on with the show. Yes, got some very cool classical melodic movements going on in here. Lots of classical influence going on. I'm not usually too keen on rhythmic stuff like that, but those gallops under the solo is just so good. I love how they have so many different vocal types going on, right? Not vocals, but voices. Yes. I really like how the lead part here is playing with the rhythmic element going on in the backgrounds. part's moving real fast, but it has a ton of groove. I love that. Nice switch up to double time here. Just a small change, doubling up the snares. And now we cut the snares in half, and it feels like it's halftime. Simple change. Oh man, I honestly thought there was going to be more there. Um, yeah. So I remember being, I'm pretty sure I remember being impressed by Shadow of Intent last time. If not, this has solidified it. This is definitely a band I need to pay attention to. Now, one thing I really want to talk about is the classical influence in here. It is ridiculously prominent. And it's actually funny. Before I started this channel, especially before we looked at bands like Nightwish, and did we do Epica? I think we did Epica. Anyways, stuff that's by label classical metal. Before we checked out stuff like that, and I was informed that that's classical metal, this is what I assumed classical metal would sound like. This takes a lot of the theoretical ideas of classical and incorporates it with what I always imagined the heavy metal sound is. Um, it's just the speed and the rhythmic dominance. There's just so much going on that's rhythmically complex. Aside from the melodic stuff going on, there's just a lot of rhythmic complexity going on in here too. And then just the speed of playing that and the huge soundscape. You have just a few instruments taking up all this space. And to me, that is the metal sound. But then the composition side is utilizing ideas and concepts that were popular, especially during the Renaissance period. That's kind of what I assumed classical metal sounds like. Come to find out, classical metal is a lot tamer and just sounds classical. Doesn't necessarily use classical ideas. It just sounds classical. It has that, I don't know, ultimate, not ultimate, that stereotypical, classical. Classical spans decades, decades. Classical spans centuries, and we just kind of use this blanket classical term, to span all these. That's like just calling it rock, and not thinking about the fact that '60s rock is totally different than 2010s rock. Um, I guess that kind of blanket generalization happens everywhere, though. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of really cool classical concepts showing up in here, especially within chord properties. You can hear it in the chord progressions, you can hear it in the guitar solos and lead lines and the notes that they select in those melodies to write the melodies, the notes that are selected. Basically, everywhere that two or three notes kind of come together in a short amount of time, you can hear some DNA of Renaissance music in there. And that is really cool. I love the way that sounds. Don't get me wrong, I love blues. All right, the blues scale is phenomenal. Working within minors and uh, geez, I'm blanking out. Anyways, oh, it's been a long day. Uh, Working within the more like sadder chords and kind of juxtaposing them with more happier stuff like majors and kind of creating that sort of harsh darkness that metal they sort of the darkness that blues kind of encapsulated, and then metal put the harshness on it. um, Rock and metal really put the distortion on that sound. I appreciate that. I do. I think metal has a very distinctive sound because of its ties to blues. But there is something about distorted instruments using chords from the Baroque and Renaissance periods of classical music. I don't know if it's just because I'm inclined to like those. I have a lot of experience listening to those music styles. Um, and maybe it's just fresh, it's new for me to hear those chord properties with these new timbres. Maybe that has something to do with it. Biases play into everything that deals with music. It completely encapsulates what we love and what we don't love. And it's all about what we bring to the table and our experiences with music in the past. So there's a very strong argument to say that I enjoy this because I've enjoyed classical before coming to it. But there is just, like I was saying, there's something about hearing those chord properties and note combinations with distorted instruments, especially at the speed. Classical, there are some fast songs in the wider classical genre, but metal, I think, really decided to take everything up to the next level. And I think a lot of that isn't necessarily due to the composition, but it's due to the sparseness. When you listen to speed in an orchestra or a symphony, especially when you're talking about speed in, um, we'll say, woodwinds, just to kind of get away from the string section with the guitars. Um, Whenever you start incorporating breath, when you have to breathe, you can play fast notes. That's all about building muscle with your mostly your tongue, but also your lungs, and you can get away with actual quick notes. Get those quick staccato notes. You can do that with your tongue, or you can do it with your breath. And a good double tonguing essentially is alternating between tongue and breath. Uh, Triple tonguing, I don't. I I've had triple tonguing explained to me. It doesn't make sense. I can't explain where the third stop comes from. um, and then I have heard that there's like one or two musicians that have done quadruple tonguing, but honestly, I think that's more of a fancy way of just really fast double tonguing. Um, But yes, you can get the speed, but you're not going to get the length. The length of time. I can do some pretty quick double tongues, but you're going to get a bar and a half, two, 3 bars, maybe tops out of me, depending on the speed of the song. Um, it, it's not going to happen. For woodwinds to play something like this song, you are going to have multiple instruments doubling up a part. So you would need two trumpets, and they can alternate their breaths so that it sounds like one fluid part of a song, even though each player, each musician, is taking breaths. They're resting for a second. So to me, I think the speed of this is always more impressive in metal, just because it is one person, nonstop, and just the muscle required not to become fatigued. Especially these guys play full shows, man. 40 minutes long, and assuming they play like this, or speed metal bands, they play fast stuff for a whole set. I mean, that's just on another level as far as I'm concerned. So maybe that also has something to do with it, just because it's not just hearing the ideas inside of the constraints of the metal sound, but it's also just knowing that it's so few people creating the soundscape. So that's always really cool too. But to get back and focus on Shadow of Intent specifically, um, yeah, this song just pulls it all together. They have some clean sections in the guitars. They have some distorted sections, and they play with the tools. They're not separate sections. They're separate instruments. There are clean lines under your distorted lines, and I really love the way that sounds. I wish more bands would play around with timbre like that, because I feel too often we see these segmented parts. We have bands that can write really beautiful, clean stuff. They can write some really brutal, heavy stuff, but they don't really mix them too often. It's you have your heavy and then you have your soft. And I really like listening to two of them combined. And I think Shadow of Intent does this masterfully in this track. Their transitions are also just phenomenal. It felt like one complete song. Other than when it kind of pulled back a bit, the vocalist part at the end, where it was if you remove the vocalist, it was mostly, I think it was a clean guitar and maybe something else, and then the drums. It was fairly sparse, and the vocals were high in the mix. That was definitely what they wanted you to pay attention to for that section. I think it would have felt a little too sparse without the vocals, but regardless, it was a drastic change. It was a very short stop, just bam. Now we're into this sparse section, and then when the vocals were done talking about whatever they were talking about, boom, we're back into the metal section. I think that was the only time there was a really sharp transition that but still didn't take me out. I think that's the important part. You can have sharp transitions. They don't have to beautifully connect every section of the song, but it's more about making sure that it doesn't feel out of place. And it didn't. It did stick out a little bit, but it didn't really remind me, hey, that was a harsh transition. We're in a new section now. So that's always good. I am not keen on the vocals though. I don't think that surprises anybody. Um, they are very, very unique. So I think it fits with this concept that they're an alien race coming to check on their life. Well, not necessarily the story part. They're an alien race, and I think it kind of feeds into that. It's very inhuman. I will give them a ton of credit for coming up with a very inhuman sound for their vocalist, to kind of embody that. You don't see a lot of vocalists doing that. They might use something, maybe use a typical fry or growl to kind of differentiate voices, but rarely do you really see that ingenuity in creating a new sound for what is in your story, your narrative, your theme, something not human. So I appreciate that on the thematic level. Uh, it was new. It was different to listen to. I'll give you that. So yeah, Shadow Intent, real good stuff all around. I loved every bit of this track from start to finish. Just surprised me, and I love that. I love to be surprised. I love to hear new things too. Like I said, it's we've listened to some classical metal on here, and now we've heard. I mean, I think Shadow of Intent's other song was like this too, but now we've heard a metal song with some really, really heavy classical influences. And that's not to say that we haven't heard that before on this channel. I think it just shines through really strong here. And also, recency bias. I just heard this. I really enjoyed it. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on. I'm sure there are other bands that we've checked out that have done it just as well, but I'm just blown away by this. So it makes me think, yeah, we've never heard, anything on this level before, but that might not be true. Recency bias and all that. Hmm. Yeah, you should go check that out. Recency bias is a really cool psychological effect. I am not a psychologist. I took a couple of electives in psychology because it interests me, but I'm not going to sit here and try to explain that. I can roll it off the top of my head, but if you're interested in that, about how things that you've recently seen can seem better or worse because they're recent, go check that out. It's a really cool concept. I'm sure there's some YouTubers out there who definitely could explain that better than me and probably make it more interesting. So, yeah, I guess that's where we're going to leave this one off, talking about psychology. Huh. Classical metal. Well, this is not classical metal. This is technical death metal, I think, but with a heavy classical inspiration. I really want to call it classical metal. To me, this is classical metal. This is classical metal, man. Why is this not classical? Who named these genres? Who got this one messed up so bad? All right, that's where you guys come in. Though, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought about Shadow of Intent, the aftermath of Jat Krula. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And I'm pretty sold on Shadow of Intent. Hit me up with some new recommendations for them because they need to be on the channel again. I need to listen to more of their stuff. This is just phenomenal work. While you're down there in the comments, you can like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Those buttons are above the comments but under the video. And next to that is the description, which has links to my Twitter and my Patreon account. You can also check me out tomorrow. I'll be back at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC with the penultimate video for this week's theme of Unknown Gems, which is some really cool stuff where we get to check out bands that most people don't know of. Stuff that kind of flies under people's radars. We've checked out 3 so far, and they've all been pretty cool, so I'm excited about these last 2 that are a bit more popular, even though these are unpopular picks, kind of. That's a conundrum. The most popular, unpopular ones. But yeah, check back tomorrow if you'd like to see some new videos under that theme, and then Friday's the final one in the week. Saturday will be the final Patreon picks, and Sunday will be my day of rest because I will tell you, this online schooling is basically homeschooling with a curriculum I didn't have to build, and that's basically my new full-time job. I am an unpaid teacher on top of making these videos and doing everything else I do. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm exhausted by the end of the day. Ah man, but it's all good. It's all good. I get to hang out with you guys and experience some new music, and that's a good way to spend the end of the day. That's a good way to unwind from teaching some stuff. So cool stuff all around. Like I said, I'll be back tomorrow, and Sunday will be my day off. Yeah, so I think I already did my whole sign off. You guys take care out there. Be safe and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.